got a $50 million contract to build a children's hospital in Basra, but the cost trebled and their contract wasn't renewed. Not surprisingly, Bechtel blames the insurgency. 24 local workers were killed. US Army engineers were left to pick up the pieces and finish the hospital. Worst of all is the saga of Iraq's health clinics. Parsons were contracted to build 150 of them.
I've described it as the single largest failure of any program in the Iraq Relief and Reconstruction enterprise. $186 million was spent under the Parsons contract. By the time the contract was completed, 6 clinics had been turned over to...
Just six?
To the Iraqi government.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's not so much how I feel, it's the fact that a very important program that would have helped millions of Iraqis fell off the rails.
Parsons say the clinics were never funded adequately, and they were told to cut construction time from 2 years to 1.
Sheer deception.
Mismanagement, fraud and waste are only part of the story of rebuilding Iraq. The country desperately needed security. Enter the private military companies. The insurgency was a golden opportunity for big players like Blackwater. The Bush administration were keen to outsource the battle space. The issue here isn't fraud, but the legal framework these companies operate within. In September last year, Blackwater guards fired on a group of people in Baghdad, killing 17, including a mother and child. The FBI is still investigating, but the Iraqi government says Blackwater opened fire first. It wasn't the only time. Congress called Blackwater's boss, Eric Prince, to answer for his company's record.
Blackwater appears to have fostered a culture of shoot first and sometimes kill, and then ask the questions.
You do admit that Blackwater personnel have shot and killed innocent civilians, don't you?
No, sir, I disagree with that. I think there's been times when guys are using defensive force to protect themselves, to protect the package they're trying to get away from danger. There could be ricochets, there are traffic accidents. Yes, this is war.
Eric Prince's family has given hundreds of thousands of dollars to Republican causes. Mr. Prince was an intern in the White House when George Bush's father was president. Blackwater's contracts to guard US diplomats and generals are worth over $1 billion. None of its employees have been tried or convicted over any of the 195 shootings. After the invasion, the Americans passed a law giving foreign contractors immunity from prosecution in Iraq.
My question is in regards to private military contractors. I asked your Secretary of Defense a couple months ago what law governs their actions. Mr.
I was going to ask him. Go ahead. Help.
Well, I was hoping your answer might be a little more specific.
I don't mean to be dodging the question, although it's kind of convenient in this case, but never...
British security companies have won contracts from the Americans too. And that took us to Kurdistan in northern Iraq. Last October on this road, a local radio journalist was sharing a taxi with another man and his sister. Kurdistan's relatively safe and peaceful compared to other parts of the country. But suddenly they found themselves under fire. Exactly why is disputed.
The first bullet hit my ear. I fell badly injured. The second hit my arm. Now my arm doesn't work, and I lost my ear.
There were bullets. They were shooting. I touched my eye. It was sticking out. My head was open.
The local police chief who'd heard the gunshots was rushing to the scene. He wanted to stop the gunmen leaving, find out who they were.
I tried to stop them. I went to the road and raised my hand, but they didn't stop. They'd got their weapons ready to shoot, and I didn't want the problem to get worse.
Afterwards, the police discovered the gunmen were from a British security company called Erinis. They were guarding some US Army engineers, and their convoy had stopped to mend a tire. Erinis later said the taxi had driven around stationary traffic, fast towards them, ignoring their warning signals.
How fast were you going, and did you see anybody on the side of the road telling you to stop with flashing lights and sirens?
There was nothing. We didn't know it was a military vehicle or a family car. We couldn't see them from that distance. There were no signals. They just hit us for no reason.
Erinis said that carefully aimed disabling shots were fired into the engine block. The pictures of the taxi taken on the day show 3 bullet holes through the windscreen. Not aimed at the driver, Erinis told us, but shots that bounced off the road. Its men said no police were present, and they only left when an ambulance arrived. Sanger lost half his ear. His hearing's permanently damaged. Zirak lost an eye and needs an operation to remove shrapnel which could blind him. All each victim received was £1,200 from the US Army. No word at that time from Erinis.
They told me it will cost me a lot of money, more than $50,000. No company has called me, and they haven't done anything for me. I'm left like this.
What exactly happened that day will never be resolved by a court here. That law passed by the Americans gives Erinis guards immunity in Iraq. Erinis turned down our interview request, saying a US Army report supports its actions as a graduated professional response to a potential suicide attack.
State-of-the-art technology, innovative business strategy.
Is there any military duty which hasn't been privatized in Iraq? And what control should there be in such a chaotic place?
And soon America will have a real choice.
Next stop, Princeton, and another whistleblower. Eric Fair is training to be a minister in the church. He's supported the war in Iraq and put his CV on the internet to see if he could get a job there.
Khaki offered the job of interrogation. I'd been a police officer, I'd been a linguist, and that seemed like an interesting job.
Khaki, an American technology corporation, had won a contract to supply interrogators. Eric wasn't a soldier, he was a civilian. But he was sent to Abu Ghraib, notorious for those pictures. Eric worked alongside the military as the war intensified, along with the pressure to get information out of prisoners.
It was out of control. There were no lines. There was no clear idea who was in charge. In some ways it felt like a high school locker room, that there was hazing. In other ways people were clearly experimenting with things that were just sort of cruel and inhuman.
The pictures of the abuse by US military police and civilian interrogators were taken in the so-called hard site at Abu Ghraib. Eric didn't work there, but he was given a tour one day by a Khaki colleague who did.
My interrogations at Abu Ghraib were not abusive. I used direct line questioning. The hard site was a different place, and everyone has seen the pictures and heard the stories, and I can say with certain confidence that it's a lot worse than most people think.
It was worse than people think.
Absolutely. The photographs that you've seen were the tip of the iceberg.
An army investigation later confirmed that dogs had been set on prisoners. One of the men who did that, the same Khaki employee who showed Eric around. Official reports also highlighted the confusion between the military and civilian